Hello and welcome to the New World Review, your source for everything anime and manga, and today we are back with some more Jujutsu Kaisen Wonder to review the Versus Mahito arc. Mahito being the name of the dude with the face, which sure is oddly unspecific, but there's really only one character in the series so far where you can safely say that his face is definitely his aesthetic defining feature. In any case, this was a pretty incredible arc that threw a ton of great stuff our way, including Yuji's first proper conflict as a Jujutsu sorcerer, the exploration of what seems to be a fantastic antagonist in Mahito, as well as the very tragic existence of Junpei, plus another thoroughly captivating presence in Naomi. This arc just had me hooked from beginning to end, and we shall begin with the latter character I mentioned, because Naomi is a fantastic addition to this cast. He is a very necessary presence to balance out the flippant insanity of Gojo, and I think it's a huge credit to Akutami's writing that he can take a character with such stern, stoic traits and make Naomi every bit as interesting as someone like Gojo. It's a lot harder than it seems to make a cool, stern guy this intriguing, mainly because that kind of personality by their very nature is heavily reserved with a lot of barriers preventing readers or watchers from getting to know them beyond a superficial level, as opposed to the more goofy, lovable loudmouths. And Akutami does this so simply as well. I really did immediately connect with Naomi right from the get-go because he says so little, but what little he does express is very efficient. None of his words or actions are wasted, and you get a very clear picture of him almost immediately. Add on top of that a pretty fantastic design, a very intriguing style of sorcery, and we have a nigh-on perfect character. Perfect in the sense of wanting to be invested in him, not necessarily his beliefs and actions. Which, speaking of, like Gojo, Naomi is a clear revolutionary in the making. He has an extreme distaste for the current global system, which he expressed in a more social manner. There was a very cool flashback showcasing how empty his life was, managing money of the rich, and how he saw humble bakeries as far more important to society at large. But even without the flashback, we had a clear picture of him pretty much immediately after he said, well, Jujutsu sorcerers, they're idiots, but working in an office is idiotic. So I chose the lesser of two evils, which is a great example of what I mean by efficient. That really did tell me everything that his flashback ended up conveying, just with no emotion attached to it. Which isn't to say that the flashback was unnecessary, it definitely wasn't, because that emotion is very important, but it's more of a credit to Akutami for flawlessly conveying who this man is without needing a flashback to do so. The flashback was just the icing on the cake. In delicious Naomi cake. And on top of that, he just had so many badass lines throughout this arc, my favorite of which was the office worker style thread of, "It's 5:30. I started work at 10 today, so no matter what, I'm clocking out by 6. Never before has office language sounded so wonderfully threatening, and I also love that his office lifestyle has carried over so strongly into his sorcery as well. I found the overtime condition particularly interesting because I love the idea of limiting your powers during standard work hours in order to significantly increase your curse prowess in the event that one is forced to work overtime. And I also believe he had another restriction, which was to reveal exactly how his curse technique worked, which I don't know if this was literally stated, I forget to be honest with you, but surely this once again results in some sort of power boost for basically kneecapping himself by giving the enemies that information. It reminds me a lot of Genthru from Hunter x Hunter, who had a very similar condition where he needed to disclose exactly how his nen abilities operated as an activation requirement. There's just something I really love about power systems where, yeah, sure, you can achieve high output, but you also need to pay an equal price for that power. And the price that you, dear viewer, may need to pay is that of subscribing to the New World Review, which will set a binding vow, granting regular injections of Jujutsu Kaisen content administered straight into your YouTube feed. A very powerful and highly advantageous mechanic that simply should not be ignored. But speaking of, curse mechanics and structure get some very nice expansions here as well during the arc. Something that really took my eye is the idea of the fly heads actually, mostly because I'm glad that we're not just, outright neglecting lower level curses. The whole idea of the grade hierarchy kind of spooked me because I feared that it would be immediately made irrelevant, but it's nice to see that there are some genuine and interesting uses at the very least for these lower grade existences. I mean, putting them to work to find out if someone is a curse user or not, that's a cool little utility idea that keeps the lower grades somewhat relevant. And I also quite bizarrely enjoyed the additional idea of the sorcerer versus curse grade system being staggered. Like, it's not as simple as grade 1 sorcerer is equal to grade 1 curse. And it makes all the sense in the world, because if your job was to exterminate these things, then why would you give them an even matchup? So yes, a grade 2 sorcerer should absolutely wipe the floor with a grade 2 curse, which in the end isn't all that big of a deal, but it gives the series that tiny bit more depth. The idea that there is this thoroughly thought out human bureaucracy at play, and the idea that not everything can be summed up by some nice, neat little system. Very reminiscent of real life. Meanwhile, the concept of residuals is also quite fun because once again, it adds an element of risk to using cursed energy. But along with that, it also adds strategy. Say if you wanted to deliberately leave a residual trail, fun stuff to play with as an author, I imagine, if you can can keep track of it all. But now we're going to move to one hell of a crazy mofo being Mahito. This arc delves so much more into him than I really expected things to this early on, but he holds a highly dangerous yet very interesting philosophy. The concept of life containing no weight or value, and in his mind there is no limitation on how life should or could be used for personal benefit. He's very much the anti-Yuji who began this series with the idea that all life holds value, even those deemed worthless by society. And we'll get to Yuji in a bit because, yeah. But Mahito holds a very appropriate technique for his views, being that he's able to manipulate souls. Also, very casual confirmation of the existence of souls there. One of the most complex discussions in all of humanity, and we've just solved it right here. But what Mahito represents is very much counter to everything that I suppose we are theoretically supposed to believe in as values, which does make some sense as he is a cursed spirit himself, born of hatred, I believe. What's really interesting though is that as much as he tells Junpei not to be indifferent, Mahito himself seems quite indifferent towards humanity right now. Like, he definitely doesn't see the value in life, but he also hasn't been shown as wildly driven to get rid of it either. Right now he's just screwing around with his grotesque experiments, having a bit of fun, and I'm sure that there is a much deeper drive somewhere, because for a creature born specifically of hatred, there's just got to be something stronger lurking. Which is definitely hinted at because Mahito is pretty directly equated to Gojo, having this sense of superficiality but also a deep, dark well of power, which is also terrifying because he is still developing said power. I loved his domain expansion though. There was a true sense of dread when Mahito activated it, and I felt for sure that Naomi was going to die, especially because that was the very moment where his flashback was shown. And usually seeing a character's history is a pretty good sign that they're about to die imminently. But the Sukuna twist there was a very nice way of dealing with all of that. But now we need to talk about Yuji, because he faced and arguably is still facing quite a crisis. Earlier I mentioned that he sees value in all life, but he really did have to confront that guiding philosophy right here, and in an intriguing twist for a shonen manga, Yuji did not quite manage to overcome it. Arguably, he didn't overcome it at all. Even at the very end of the battle, Yuji was hell-bent on killing Mahito. Killing Yuji. Gasp. Especially since Mahito is a cursed spirit, you could say exercising him, but no, Yuji wanted to kill him. Yuji's beliefs failed him, and after witnessing what happened to Junpei, Yuji is kind of broken. And he did kill during this arc, make no mistake. There was no clean way for Yuji to get out of this. He is stained from here on out, and at this point, all he can really do is reevaluate where he stands in life, or even how he views life. It was a pretty deep and distressing arc for Yuji, and yet another in a growing line of events where he was pretty much powerless to save people in the way he wanted. And there's something of a morbidly charming quality about watching Yuji fail, because all of these experiences are going to add up to either one glorious climax where he finally does save someone, or alternatively in one big moment of self-implosion. And I really do enjoy not knowing what path we'll end up with. I'm not 100% that this story ends well for him, and if it does, I'm not confident that it will do so without a lot more pain and suffering, pushing him beyond his breaking point eventually. But now to Junpei, and man, I feel a little bit sick just saying his name because what a tragedy. Watching his story here was like seeing a train wreck in slow motion. From all the stuff about his high school to the really twisted mentor-mentee relationship that he formed with Mahito, and ultimately being pushed over the edge, then brought back briefly by Yuji, only to have his life snuffed out for good. And as part of this, I also want to underscore his mother. I knew the very moment she showed up that she was probably as good as dead. You need to be very careful about lovable tertiary characters in a series like this, because chances are they are deliberately designed to be as likable as possible within the shortest amount of time, simply so that you can feel the pain of their loss. And there was also something very interesting about the way in which her death was communicated. It wasn't seen on screen, it wasn't stated by another character through dialogue, it wasn't even given by a narrator. It was just reported in pure prose at the beginning of a chapter, which may sound simple and even underwhelming, but that is very unique for the manga medium, and it gave Jujutsu Kaisen a brief moment of this novelistic magic where peak imagination was activated, especially with the horrific details of what happened to her body and that it was found stuffed in a bed with ice packs, like really excruciatingly detailed stuff that has no place being conveyed visually. I don't think there's anything Akutami could have drawn that would have been more powerful than just reading these words. And it's very much making me appreciate the keen intuition that Akutami has for situations like this, because he is clearly not afraid to depict brutality, but in this case, he knew when to hold back and how this event would have peak impact. But all all in all, like I said, it's truly tragic. Perfectly set up as well, with plenty of moments of hope, one of which was when Yuji and Junpei were bonding over movies, which was also a nice callback to the previous arc, but the whole setup gave me the very distinct impression that, yeah, Junpei's mother, she was probably done for, but he might have a chance. Junpei himself could be brought back from the brink and become a new student at the Jujutsu High School. The setup for that was definitely there, but Alchemy took all of that and said no. This is going to be one of those times when something horrible just happens. There is no last minute salvation, no resurrection, or at least I hope not. I guess I don't know for sure, but the general idea is that you're just going to be served a dish of raw tragedy, so bon appetit. And as sad as it is, I do appreciate that because personally, I'm a little scarred and I feel like I've lost a character with Junpei. And that helps me identify a lot more with Yuji because that would be exactly what he's feeling, although in his case, it would be on a significantly more extreme level. So we had quite a somber ending to the arc, although I should also note there was plenty of comedy to be had as well. It was quite well balanced, especially with stuff like Yuji stealing the teacher's pants. But then even that teacher gets turned around on us and hits the audience with some hard drama right at the end of the arc. Oh, and something I haven't mentioned yet, it was also great to see Yuji developing his skills. I really like the introduction of how his cursed energy works, with the whole not being able to keep up with his superhuman speed, resulting in this bizarre kind of double strike style effect. There's such a nice simplicity about it, but it's also not so simple that it equates to, I hit you with strong fist now. It's not that. There's a bit of nuance to it, which is greatly appreciated. And really, the only bad thing to say about this arc is that there was not enough panda. And by not enough, I mean zero panda, not one panda to be seen. That should be a crime, and Akutami should be in prison. But that pretty much does it for this blind review of Jujutsu Kaisen's versus Mahito arc. And what do you guys think? Please do leave your thoughts in the comments below, or even join my Discord server. And if you're keen for some more Jujutsu sorcery, then please do check out some of my other videos, or even subscribe to the channel for very maybe regular Jujutsu Kaisen morbidity delivered straight into your YouTube feed. But for now, this has been the New World Review, and I'll see you next time.